We're now speaking with Kendra Johnston. She is the president and CEO of the AME, and we'll be discussing all things to do with exploration and mining investments. Kendra, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you again. We spoke a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. Not a lot has progressed in terms of the gold price, but you were telling me offline that there's been a lot of new advancements when it comes to exploration, investments, the capital formation front of the exploration space, especially when it pertains to Western Canada. So what's your sentiment overall? Are you feeling good about the space, or do you think there's more trouble ahead right now?
No, I'm a geologist. I'm an explorer. I'm an eternal optimist. So I feel great about the space. It's hard to say anything otherwise. But you know what's interesting, when we look back this time last year, the gold price was in a really great spot. And as we finished up 2020, there was a lot of activity in the financial markets and junior explorers financing and bringing in a lot of money. So when that happens at the end of a year with flow-through funds, all of those dollars need to be spent in the next year. And so over this past year, through the summer of 2021, we saw some incredible advances in some of the mineral exploration projects across the country, but specifically here in BC. We have now 1,100 mineral exploration companies listed on stock exchanges that are based in British Columbia. And I think with COVID, a lot of those companies looked close to home. They stayed close to home. And so this past year, we actually saw $660 million invested in the ground in British Columbia, which is almost a 50% increase over 2020 numbers.
Kendra, I'm going to come back to some of these numbers that you talked about and drill a little bit deeper, no pun intended, and we'll talk about the AME, of course. But I want to go back to your point about you being an eternal optimist because you're a geologist. I've always wanted to ask this question to a geologist. I've heard from other geologists and perhaps some economists that gold, well, the mineral sector, but gold in particular, has already peaked in the sense that peak gold has been reached. The maximum production of gold on an annual per annum output basis has already peaked. Reserves are dwindling in the ground. First of all, I wonder if you agree with this assessment. And second, if you do you see an existential crisis for geologists that maybe in the distant future, there's nothing more to dig up, nothing more to explore?
That's a really hard question. I suppose from a scientific perspective, there is a finite amount of any metal that's in the ground. So yes, at some point, I suppose we're going to work ourselves out of a job, but I don't think we're anywhere close to it. As over time, as history progresses, science gets bigger, better, and stronger. And for us, what that means is our ability to search deeper for mineral deposits, search deeper for gold deposits. I mean, we all know about these vast open pit gold mines and even, quite frankly, underground gold mines that are relatively close to surface and easy to find. But when you look at the mineral potential of some of the other areas where it's still hidden, we're looking for hidden items. And so there's so much more to be found. There's opportunities even close to home here in BC that we know are out there. We just have to figure out how to get through that surface material to figure out a way to do it economically. And so when you look at new technologies that are coming on board, you look at refinements in the science of being able to process a mineral or metal coming out of the ground, process the rock itself. Those economics are getting better each and every day, which has an effect on the price of being able to mine it, which has an effect on the ability for us to go out and explore and the grade of a deposit that we would need to find. So there's far more to be found, and we're getting better at it each and every day. So we have so much further to go ahead of us.
Just to clarify, I'm not saying you and I are going to be out of a job by next year. I'm just saying at some point in the future, geologists are going to have a harder time looking for minerals. I'm just curious, what are some of the main minerals that you've worked with throughout your career?
Oh, I've pretty much always been a gold explorer, and of course, with gold comes a variety of other commodities that are closely associated with that. So often you find silver alongside gold, and then in a porphyry deposit, for example, you would find often gold and silver, but along with copper, lead as well. I've dabbled in a few other commodities, diamonds, for example, but my career has been very, very much focused on gold.
So diamonds aren't your best friend, gold is. That's good to know.
For me personally.
Yeah, personally, okay. But okay, Kendra, no doubt this has come up throughout the AME or throughout discussions with people you've worked with. the transition into electric vehicles is making headlines everywhere. From a geology standpoint, are we ready to produce or increase the supply of the base commodities, base metals, that's needed to produce more batteries, more infrastructure for the grids? How are we looking on the supply front, Kendra, basically for the next 15 years?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it varies based on the commodity that's needed. So you look at a commodity like copper, there's a fair amount of copper out there. There's a pretty good supply. We need to keep up the activity that we're currently at to be able to maintain. And really, I think we need to increase the supply that's out there to reach where we're going to be in 15 years.
How are we going to increase the supply, Kendra?
And that's exactly where we go, is how is the mineral explorers? So we've already been thinking about this as an exploration community for the last, 20, 30 some odd years of we're the ones that are out there actively looking for these things. And so copper is an obvious one, but there's many others, from molybdenum to lithium to cobalt to, the list goes on. And those are the things that we're already on the way to finding. And hopefully we can identify some of those, build out those resources, pass them on to the miners so that they can get out and start producing. But we absolutely need to get out there and find more of these minerals and metals that are not only economic, but also could be produced in an environmentally sustainable and socially responsible way.
Well, minerals and resource investors are probably wondering, Kendra, you've worked on the ground with people on the ground. What are some of the biggest opportunities right now for growth, looking around not just Canada, but perhaps the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of those critical minerals that are needed for electrification, for the low carbon future, for the green economy, there's a huge opportunity in those spaces. There's still a little bit of understanding, I think, that needs to happen. I think there's a lot of very smart investors out there who have figured out those commodity markets and how a single new deposit will impact the supply and demand curves for those commodities. But from a retail perspective and from a geologist perspective, who are going in and looking for these minerals and metals, I'm not sure that understanding is fully developed yet. And so I think there's lots of opportunities to dive in and to find some of these new minerals. And we're quite frankly, we're in need of them. So there's lots of work to be done there. And I think there's some really fascinating things to come.
Fascinating things to come. Can you give us a teaser of what these fascinating things are?
Well, no, I think there's new deposits to be found. I think there's new technologies that are coming that are going to be able to connect the minerals and metals that we have to be able to produce some of these new technologies that just haven't been developed yet. And that's getting stronger all the time.
Let's touch on these new technologies. Some miners who have been around in the space have told me that the industry has not advanced as far as it could have, especially when you compare it to, let's say, the oil and shale industries that have transformed fracking through their technologies over the last 2 decades. Gold and the resource sector, the metal sector at least, just hasn't seen that yet. So what are these new technologies that you're talking about? What can we expect in the future?
So I think in general, we've seen a lot more R&D work in the oil and gas space than we have in the mineral exploration and mining space. And I think that's changed over the last, 5 to 10 years, give or take. There's a lot more energy and curiosity being put into R&D. So we're seeing a lot of work now, specifically here in BC by the Mining Association. They have a challenge out right now looking at water use and how we can reduce water use on a mine site. We have a lot of projects, both mining projects as well as exploration projects, that are trying to go entirely electric. They have entirely electric mine haul trucks. They're trying to work towards non-diesel field camps for exploration, and removing diesel out of a field camp in a remote location is a really, really hard thing to do. It's just doesn't quite balance with solar panels and that type of thing. So, but everybody's trying to make that little bit of a shift. I think when we talk about technologies, it's everything from how that plays a role in mineral exploration, but it's also the technologies that we need to develop. When we look at the medical industry, for example, there's lots of technologies that are shared between the two industries. So we look at X-ray technology or MRI technology. We look at gravity technology. All those things are being used in the medical facilities, and we can bring a lot of that over in that microscopic telescopic even technology into mineral exploration and into mining. So it's looking at our partners out there. It's looking at other industries and other sectors and seeing what they're doing and trying to understand what kinds of parallels we can draw and how we could implement some of that technology into what we're doing here. So that could be, different types of drills that, I go back to the idea of a telescopic instrument in a surgery, something like that could be expanded and made larger and be implemented to be able to potentially mine rock or look at a different way to be able to drill into the ground. So I think there's some ideas that could be expanded upon with a little bit of creativity.
The sci-fi nerd in me is a little bit disappointed you didn't say space mining.
Well, there's certainly a lot of people out there looking at space mining as well. It's a little.
Are there actually? I haven't spoken to one serious miner who's currently producing, who is investigating this and putting capital into drilling on an asteroid or the moon.
I know there's people thinking about it. I don't know that there's anybody seriously there yet, but it wasn't that long ago, 15-ish years ago, when we were having this conversation about deep sea mining, and now definitely companies out there that are in the process of permitting. So
just entertain this idea for 1 minute, okay, Kendra? You're a geologist. How feasible is it to drill on an off-planet location?
Well, from an economic perspective, it's not feasible at all right now.
Okay.
But down the road, who knows? I mean, I think.
Well, I read that there's enough gold on the asteroid belt, for example. There's enough gold on the asteroid belt to increase our holdings by trillions of dollars. That's probably just a conservative estimate. I mean, that if you extract all the gold there, wouldn't that make everybody a billionaire? Well, I guess not, because then gold would be worth nothing. But you get the idea. Absolutely.
It's certainly an interesting idea to think about, but there's certainly some challenges in getting there and getting, all the supplies. Sure. You think about how difficult it is to build a camp in, the North Arctic region and how expensive that is. You multiply that by a couple thousand, a couple 100,000 perhaps. And,
True.
Being able you'd have to have some pretty incredible ore grades to be able to make that happen.
You said it's a couple 100,000 times more difficult. You didn't say it's impossible. That is encouraging.
I'm sure it's not impossible. we're an optimistic bunch, so
we're just
I'm sure
not quite
we'll
there
get
yet.
there.
Yeah, one day.
It might not be in our lifetime, though.
Oh, that's too bad. I was hoping to follow up with you and interview again when we mine in space. Bringing it back down to earth now, figuratively and literally. AME Roundup, we had a hugely successful conference. Tell us about it. What happened this year? Give us some of the highlights.
Yep. The Roundup Conference was great. It just ended on Thursday. It ended yesterday. It is still available on demand, so anybody who's interested can still log on, register, and take part virtually if they're interested in seeing some of the talks that happened. Some fabulous themes emerged and some fabulous numbers were released this year. As we talked about a little bit earlier, the BC government released their numbers of exploration work and mining operations that had happened this year. So $660 million spent in the ground by the mineral exploration community across BC this year. That's almost a 50% increase from last. Actually, it's more than 50% increase from last year when the number was $422 million. We also saw an incredible increase in drilling this year. Last year we had 991,000 meters drilled across the province, and this year we had 1.44 million meters drilled. So that's a whole lot of rock coming out of the ground from a mineral exploration perspective. When we flip it over and we look at the mining side, it was $12.6 billion in operations this year. Also quite an increase over last year's numbers. And then on Monday, we released our economic impact study, looking at all of the different factors that mineral exploration plays across the province and all the communities that it reaches. So that was a really interesting report as well to bring out to our community and look at some of the diversity right across the province, including where the largest expenditures were made. So the largest expenditures, perhaps not surprising, up in the northwest corner of the province in Smithers. And interestingly, the second most largest spend was in Vancouver. So it really shows that connection between the urban and rural communities here in BC of how our mineral exploration community is connected and how it relies on one another. So that was an interesting theme to pull out of Roundup this year. Some of the other themes, I think, continuation on the ESG side of things was a very strong theme. Last year, we talked about that climate action and some of the electrification pieces. We talked about that. I think the other interesting theme for me this year that emerged was the future generations. What the next generation is really passionate about, the fact that they're our future leaders, and what it is that we need to do to get them into this industry and coming along. So, and then of course, reconciliation, always a really important theme.
That's an excellent point, Kendra. I was just talking to some of my friends who are casual retail investors, and what they're interested, what they're passionate about right now is stuff like this NFT that looks like an ape that's smoking a blunt with glasses on. It's selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not interested in the actual things that build our society, which is what comes out of the ground. They're interested in memes and things that celebrities hype up. So you're up against a lot of competition. You're basically competing with Justin Bieber and a few others who are buying NFTs that hype up the space. How do you go about this? How do you go about attracting the younger generation into your world, Kendra?
It's a really great point. And, it almost doesn't matter what they say they're interested in, because anything that they bring up, you can say, okay, well, that doesn't exist without mining. An NFT doesn't exist without mining. You need the technology to create it. You need the technology to use it. And all of those things and all of those skills required to create or to use an NFT are required in mineral exploration as well. So the computer scientist, the environmental scientist, the community engagement person, the lawyer, the financier, all of those folks have roles in this industry. And so if we can get them excited about their impact on the future, their impact on technology, their impact on electrification, their impact on a low carbon future, all of those things come back to how we look for minerals and metals, how we extract minerals and metals, and the responsible nature, looking at ESG factors, looking at regulation and policy to be able to do that environmentally friendly, socially responsibly, and with good governance practices. And that's going to be how we manage to create these new technologies and maintain the new technologies that we've all become really used to. So it's making that connection for them that, the life that they've become used to with all the things around them that aren't growing their mind, we have to find a way to continue to live in this world while being able to mine and extract in this responsible way that we've started down the path. But we have to get better at it because we have to meet this low carbon goal and this net zero by 2050 goal. Okay.
Well, some bold ambitions coming from the mining sector. I hope that the next generation catches up and gets us to the moon in terms of mining, literally. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Kendra. Excellent insights. I'm sure investors appreciate your insights. And best of luck with AME going into the future and next year as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you.
Yeah. See you soon. And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel.